Do you tend to find yourself in the rather panicked recruitment and attraction version of Groundhog Day? Where, you're bubbling along quite nicely and all of a sudden there's a big panic because you need to make loads of hires. And you've got to start from scratch. So you do some activity to drive some applications, if you're lucky. And if you're luckier, you get to make some hires. And then the dust settles and you take yourself off to a dark room where you place yourself in the fetal position to recover until the next panic comes along. Sound familiar? Probably because your recruitment and attraction processes are extremely reactive. There is a proactive way of doing it, and this is just going to give an overview of what's the difference and some high-level ideas of things you can do to make you from that panicked reactive all the time, because let's face it, there's always going to be an element of that in what we do, to being a bit more proactive and strategic. So when those hiring needs do come up, you're a bit more prepared and aren't always starting from scratch. So with the two graphics I'm about to share, what I hope is that we talk about reactive versus proactive, but sometimes it's hard to get your head around at a conceptual level. So by going through these, I hope it just makes it a little bit clearer on what the differences are and how being proactive can be beneficial, and also explain where the branding, employer branding element comes into it and supports it. So reactive, I think we can all guess what this means, but to look at it in a visual way can sometimes really make you realise that there can be a better way and how that better way works. So let's go through the reactive process, right? Often, because of many challenges in organisations, although we dream of a world where talent planning is robust and it's thorough, and at the start of whatever your hiring or financial year cycle is, you've got a clear window into what the hiring needs are going to be, including attrition. But getting that data from the business is often very difficult, and it's never perfect, in my experience anyway. So what tends to happen is there's a big hiring need. And what happens then is you go away and you brief the recruiters, and there's some activity, usually in terms of kind of financial spend on job boards and social platforms like LinkedIn or maybe Glassdoor, which I think you could put in the social platform bracket. Then what you do is you turn some heads. It's job ads. It's very transactional communication. Hey, everyone, we're hiring. It's very similar to, a large retailer pumping out promotion-only adverts where if you buy one apple, you get 2 bananas free. Very transactional, very easy to commoditize and compete against, and there's no real connection. It's just very factual. We're hiring. You need a job. Let's talk. And because of that way of communication, there's no brand building. As I say, it's very much in that transactional camp. We're hiring, you're looking for a job, let's have a talk. We might be compatible, we might not, and if we're not, we'll go our separate paths, and that's where the story ends. If you're lucky doing that way, you might make some hires. Now, I appreciate this can be very different in different contexts. If you are in high volume recruitment, frontline construction, hospitality, retail, there's less of a consideration as to somebody will want to work for you or not. Usually it is commoditized. It's based on whether I can work in this shop or that shop, and it's usually my decision will usually be based on who pays me 50 pence or 50 cents more an hour. But in more high consideration roles, that's where there can be a big difference. So you can make that hire. It may or may not work because no one really knows enough about each other. The candidate doesn't really know enough about you. They'll join, they'll have a feel for the place, and if it works, it's more by luck than by design. And then everyone goes away, as I said, and the dust settles and people take a deep breath and go about their every day until the next panic. And it's rinse and it's repeat and it's constant and everyone bemoans it. They have been in the 20 or so years I've been in and around recruitment and attraction, but not enough people do much to change it because you're caught on that hamster wheel. You're too busy being busy to look up and maybe do something that's a bit more proactive. So what is proactive? The proactive process is a bit different. So that is where essentially you are investing in employer branding and branding communication to build more of an association with future audiences, not just when you need them. So you're always going to them in a panicked, we need to hire you now state, but it's more over time. You're building that connection. So whether or not they're in a transaction mode now, i.e. I'm looking for a job, but more so when they're in the future, that you're peppering them subtly with cues as to why they may want to work with you in future. So when you do approach them when there's a hiring need, in an ideal world, you can dip into a pool of candidates that you've built over time and that you've been nurturing. And I'll talk about more about that in a moment. Or you have been getting into their psyche. You've been mentally priming them with positive things about what it's like for working with you. So at the start of the year, when they start seeing your content and hearing your stories, they may not be looking for a job. But it's all being banked so that when they are, you're one of the companies or organisations who's at the top of their mental list when they're looking to go and work somewhere else. So let me just walk through this from the bottom up. So investing in branding, always on. At a really kind of simple level, this is that ongoing, most people associate this with social media. It can be more than that if you look at long-term tactics such as programmatic display, which is where you can follow people around the web with branded advertising, which again, they may not consciously see, but there's just little elements of it peppering them with that messaging of why they might want to work with you in the future. What happens is you start turning heads consistently. Now, you may not know you're turning heads because there may not be a physical digital footprint that somebody is engaging with you, and we obsess about clicks and likes and comments and visits. But a lot of your audience, you won't even know are there because they're passive, i.e. they're scrolling through their feeds, they're going through their online experiences, they're seeing you at events, but they may not be engaging with you, but mental notes are being made. In fact, most of the engagement I get from my social media activity isn't from the people who physically engage with me on the platform. It's the people who I bump into who say, oh, I've seen your stuff. I've been watching it. I've been reading it. It's been really helpful. Or not in some cases. Or, I saw your YouTube video. They're not liking it, but I know they're engaging with it. And that's where we've got to be careful with that whole digital measurement piece. Another story for another time, but just an example. So you're turning heads, you're engaging with people. You may not always know it, but in the background, that's happening as well as in the foreground with those who are actively, physically engaging and leaving an impression or a mark that they are. And what that does is change perception over time. Imagine individuals, if you're a scale-up business or an SME who people haven't heard of, this is where you get in front of them over time. And I think in sales, they used to talk about the seven points of contact before somebody remembers your name. It's a similar principle. If you're a scale-up or a startup or an SME, not a big brand, an invisible logo, sometimes we call this, who people don't know, then when I first see you, I'm not going to instantly trust you. This is where you send me content. I see it. I'm targeted. So over time, I build that association with your brand. I build that positive affinity towards it. So when I first see you, it's like, who are they? I'm not going to work for them. But you do that over the long term, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, then maybe the following year when I'm looking for work, I will be interested in you. That's how branding works. You build that connection over time. You change the perceptions over time. Now, when you do that, if you're capturing that interest, i.e. you're directing people into a CRM, a candidate relationship management system, where they can sit in a database and you can continue that communication on a regular cadence, not one that's spammy and every day or every week, but in a way that is at a decent level, not annoying, using content that is of interest to the candidates in your database, not just you talking about yourself all the time. Nobody wants to be that person at the party. But if you do that over time in a helpful way, you can take individuals from people who have no idea who you are, what you're about, and why they would want to work for you, to using content and face-to-face events where over time you build that trust, you build that intrigue, you build that excitement. So in future, when they're looking to work for you, they can, and you're not always starting from scratch. So let's take the CRM example a little bit further. Let's just say we've gone through those processes. We built a CRM database. You use social media, you use events, QR code scan here to come into our talent pool, some people call it, or talent database, whatever you want to call it. People go there. So you've got an audience of individuals who have already shown an interest in wanting to work for your organisation, and it will take time to build that database. And remember, this is about quality, not quantity. You want people in there who are right for you and where you are right for them, where over time the proposition may be compatible and they want to come and give you their all, and in return they get what's on offer from your organisation, the employee value proposition piece. So in future, when there's a hiring need, instead of spending X hundreds of thousands on other platforms, your first port of call could actually be that CRM that you've built and you've nurtured. And then when there's hiring needs, you tap into that first. Imagine a talent marketer or an employer brander going in there, pulling down a list of candidates who they know are engaging with the brand, because you can see who's opening emails and who's clicking on the links within those emails, both of which are signs of consideration and intent, i.e. someone's physically engaging with the content you're sharing them, which is a sign that they're interested in you and what you have to say. So the talent marketer can pull off that list for a specific talent audience that the recruiters might be hiring for and give that list to the recruiters. And with the instruction of, before you go and spend X thousands of pounds by tapping into a CV database that we don't own or a social media platform that we're paying thousands for, use this pool of warm leads first. So then what happens is, with here, your other spend can start to decline. Because the brand building that you're doing, again, I stress this part, over time starts to negate the need to spend the repeated cycle of advertising money or social platform licenses or whatever it is you're doing, because you're building and nurturing that talent pool on a house that you own, the CRM, on land that is yours. Then what you do is you recruit some people, and when the hiring need comes again, instead of the previous graphic where it's that up, down cycle, there's no brand equity being built, it's just rinse, repeat, panic, hire, relax, panic, etc. Here there's a hiring need, and instead of panicking and starting from scratch, you can dip into that warm pool of talent that your employer branding has been building and nurturing over time. So when you're ready, you can dip back into it and make those conversions as and when you need them. So a quick overview. I remember when I was kind of earlier in my career, people said reactive, proactive. I kind of got it, but that visual really helped me cement my understanding around it and think about tactics of how we could do that more proactive approach to our attraction and recruitment efforts. As always, I hope somebody out there found this helpful. If you'd like any support with any of the things I cover, please connect with me, contact me on LinkedIn, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.